The scene of the crime was Sugar Land, Texas, just outside Houston. The Whitaker family, by many accounts, was leading an idyllic life in their close-knit, upscale neighborhood. How do you pray for somebody who you feel has really harmed you?
So what? It's easy to sit there with the anger and the toxicity and the bitterness? That's
Oprah Winfrey, the immortal queen of American television. The woman who turned the Oprah Winfrey Show into the most powerful daytime program in history and carved her name into the very soul of global culture. She rose from poverty and obscurity, from days of not having enough to eat or wear, to become a blazing monument of resilience. A media queen holding billions in fortune and an empire unmatched, redefining not only television but the very essence of truth and healing itself. With unmatched empathy and commanding presence, she became the unshakable voice of generations, rewriting the American dream and proving that greatness can rise from wounds so deep they could destroy anyone else. For decades, she was not only a storyteller, she was the story, a living testament to courage forged from fire and pain. But behind that radiant empire lies a brutal battlefield. The suffocating loneliness, the wounds of both body and soul, and the crushing burden of carrying within her the pain of millions. The world has applauded her power for so many years, yet few dare to face the haunting truth never fully revealed. Shadows so heavy that even a colossal fortune cannot erase them. And before we begin, if those programs ever brought you faith, tears, or laughter, leave a like as a tribute to this extraordinary talent and indomitable spirit. Behind the radiant crown of global fame lies a cruel and merciless beginning, a story etched in poverty, betrayal, and abandonment. Oprah Gail Winfrey was born on January 29, 1954, in the small town of Kosciuszko, Mississippi, to a teenage mother, Verita Lee, who worked as a maid, and Vernon Winfrey, a barber and coal miner. Her parents never married. Their fragile bond shattered almost immediately, and from her first breaths, her life was marked not by love or stability, but by separation and uncertainty. A little girl left drifting between fractured households, never knowing where she truly belonged. As an infant, she was sent to live with her grandmother, Hattie Mae Lee, on a remote farm where poverty was relentless and childhood was stripped away by endless chores. Yet in that barren landscape came one priceless gift. Her grandmother taught her to read. Oprah would later recall with aching clarity, "My grandmother taught me to read the Bible before I was 3 years old." By the age of 3, she stood in church reciting scripture, her voice still that of a child, but already burning with the conviction of someone who had seen too much. Words became her only weapon, her shield, her fragile sanctuary from a world that offered her nothing else. But hunger and shame still pressed down upon her, and she admitted with heartbreaking honesty, "I wore potato sacks as dresses because we had nothing else." To the world, she was just a poor child in rags. But to Oprah, it was the first brutal lesson that dignity must be carried within when the world strips everything away. In 1960, at 6 years old, her fragile existence was torn apart once again when she was sent north to Milwaukee to live with her mother. What awaited was not comfort, but neglect. Vernita worked long hours as a maid, leaving Oprah in the care of others. Shuttled from one unstable home to another, never steady, never safe. She would later confess with devastating honesty, "I grew up never feeling wanted, never feeling safe." By her early teens, life became harsher still. She endured painful violations of trust from men around her, including her mother's companion, experiences no child should ever be forced to endure. Those betrayals robbed her of safety and innocence, leaving scars that would haunt her forever, shadows that followed her into every silent night. At 14 in 1968, tragedy struck with devastating cruelty. She gave birth to a baby boy who lived only a short while. The grief of that loss, the anguish of a motherhood denied, became a wound that would shadow her for the rest of her life. A storm of sorrow that no triumph could ever fully silence. Unable to manage her anymore, her mother sent Oprah to Nashville to live with her father. It was the harshest mercy, but also the turning point that would save her. Vernon Winfrey was strict, unyielding, a man of discipline who valued education above all else. He imposed curfews, forced her to study, demanded higher standards, and though his love was stern and sometimes cold, he became the anchor she had been denied all her life. Under his roof, Oprah was no longer a lost child drifting between homes. She began to rebuild, to find the fragile roots of belonging, to glimpse for the first time a life beyond mere survival. Years later, she would look back on those wounds with both sorrow and gratitude, admitting that they never faded, yet they became the fire that forged her will. "Turn your wounds into wisdom," she declared. And that is exactly what she did, transforming hunger into drive, rejection into empathy, instability into resilience. The cruelty of her childhood was devastating, the scars permanent, the shadows unrelenting. Yet they became the indestructible foundation of a woman who would one day rise to hold not only the attention of a nation, but the heart of the entire world. From the ashes of a stolen childhood, Oprah carried into her youth not defeat, but a hunger so fierce it refused to be silenced. While other teenagers dreamed freely, she was already clawing her way toward survival, bearing scars that no one could see, but that burned like fire beneath her skin. At just 17 years old in 1971, she entered the Miss Black Tennessee beauty pageant, not for glamour, but for a chance, for a door to open. Against all odds, she won. And with that crown came her first taste of recognition, her first proof that the world might one day listen to her voice. That victory led her to WVOL Radio in Nashville, where she began working part-time while still in high school. But behind the glow of studio lights, her reality was mercilessly different. She often arrived hungry, her purse nearly empty, her dresses borrowed or worn thin at the seams. She later recalled, "The very first time I sat in front of a microphone, I knew inside that I was meant to do this, even if no one else believed it." Night after night, she sat behind the microphone, her voice trembling but unbroken, shaping itself into a force that would one day move millions. The world saw a young woman on the rise. What they did not see were the long bus rides she took to save every cent, the rain-soaked walks home when she couldn't afford the fare, the exhaustion etched into her face as she juggled school, work, and survival, or the nights she cried in silence, terrified that poverty might swallow her before her dream could take root. By 19, she became the youngest and the first black female anchor at WLAC-TV in Nashville, a groundbreaking achievement that spoke not only of talent, but of defiance against every barrier stacked against her. A girl from rags standing in front of a camera that had never been meant for someone like her. Yet, even with these breakthroughs, the climb was unforgiving. Her paychecks barely covered food and rent, and she often arrived at studios in second-hand clothes, her stomach hollow but her will unbroken. Each broadcast, each headline was carried not with ease, but with the echoes of a little girl who once wore potato sacks for dresses. She once confessed, "I remember going to interviews in borrowed shoes, terrified they would see right through me." To executives, she was too raw, too emotional, too unpolished for television. But that very rawness, her tears, her laughter, her unguarded humanity became her gift. In 1978, she co-hosted a local talk show in Baltimore called People Are Talking. Within months, it was clear she was different. She didn't just ask questions, she lived inside them. Her empathy pierced through the walls between stage and audience.